Order. We have a quorum. All 7 members are present this evening. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion by Ms. Celia, second by Mr. Braswell. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Dr. Meyer, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll move on to item 3, our opening comments. Dr. Baker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I want to welcome all of you to our opening FY19 budget work session. It's a jumping off point for not only you but our staff as well in terms of laying the foundation for another budget season and budget development process. This evening the primary focus is on the presentation and your consideration of the draft of the capital improvement plan that Mr. Upperco will present, as well as receive questions on, and then Ms. Gaines will guide you through the work that you have done over the last year or so in terms of budget development and decisions that have been made. And then we want to conclude this evening by giving you an opportunity to provide initially your thoughts, impressions, requests in terms of consideration here at this early start of the budget season, in terms of where you'd like to see us go in terms of that process. I want to thank Ms. Gaines, our entire cabinet, all of the folks that have worked hard to put together today's presentation. And I know that you have in front of you some of these materials that you can refer to. So if you hear page numbers and those sorts of things, you should have a lot of things right there at your station. So with that, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 4. Mr. Upperco, would you like to share with us CIP 2019 to 2023?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Baker, Dr. Martin. It's my pleasure tonight to review with you the FY 2019-2023 proposed capital improvement plan.
May we have the floor computer?
Ms. Gaines has a new name tonight. We'll call you Fingers. She's in charge. She said she didn't trust me with that kind of responsibility, so. I'd like to briefly review the following this evening. We'll start with the CIP introduction, the CIP project summary totals by year from a financial standpoint, then specific highlights of projects by category in transportation, technology, and maintenance, some information on student enrollment trends and projections, and then finally the CIP timetable for adoption and eventual inclusion in the school board budget. And this may be redundant for most of you, but as you know, the capital improvement plan is a capital budget and planning document that's prepared annually by the Spotsylvania County Public Schools. The CIP covers a 5-year period, an upcoming year plus 4 years, which moves out 1 year each year. The CIP provides a forecast by which capital maintenance, capital technology, and capital transportation projects required to support the school division are planned, financed, and constructed. As you can see from the next slide, this is our 5-year CIP summary total. So if you'll bear with me, we'll take it year by year, and starting with FY 2019. Transportation, we have a total of $4.3 million worth of projects. In technology, $3.4 million. Maintenance, $23.1 million. And of that $23.1, 19.3 approximately is devoted to the Cortland renovation project. So we have a total for FY 2019 of approximately $30.8 million. In FY 20, Transportation has a total of $4 million worth of projects. Technology, $3.1 million. Maintenance, $14.8 million. And again, about $9 million of that $14.8 million in maintenance is actually devoted towards the Cortland renovation year 2. The total for FY 2020 stands at about $21.9 million. For 2021, you'll see that transportation, we have a total of $3.8 million, technology $2.3 million, and maintenance $6.8 million, for a total in FY 2021 of $12.9 million. FY 2022, $4 million devoted to transportation projects, $3.7 technology, $2.7 for maintenance projects. Total there for FY 2022, about $10.4 million. And finally, in FY 2023, $4 million for transportation, $3.1 for technology projects, and $2.1 million for maintenance projects, for a total of $9.2 million. So as we read across, the total for 5 years in the area of transportation is approximately $20 million. The total for 5 years in technology, $15.7 million. The total for 5 years in maintenance, $49.5 million, for a grand total of approximately $85.2 million over the 5-year period. Let's look at some specific projects by category. We'll start with transportation. Over the 5-year CIP, we are planning to purchase 117 77-passenger buses. And of course, again, that's 5 years. So for FY19, that breaks down to approximately 24 77-passenger buses. 36 total over the 5-year special need buses. And for FY19, that would equate to 6. 2 Head Start buses over the 5-year period. And the Head Start buses, in case you're wondering, have the integrated seats that can flip from child protective seats over to regular seats, saving a lot of time and energy and wear and tear, frankly. 5 engine replacements over those 5 years, and bus cameras every year as part of the security initiative. The Transportation Security Initiative component would be for the bus cameras. I know you haven't had a chance yet to look at the specifics, but you can find that information on page 19 in your CIP booklet if you want to go back at some point in the future and check that out. And I do want to make mention that the buses are, we maintain a 15-year bus replacement cycle as recommended by the Virginia Department of Education. Now, let's move on to technology. Some of the highlights in technology: replacing computer devices, which include laptops and desktops over the 5-year period. Response to intervention, or RTI, reading and instructional solutions for all levels, which is elementary, middle, and high school. Safety and security upgrades, and the safety and security upgrades included under the technology banner would be upgraded security cameras, an electronic access control where you could actually swipe your ID card as in the locks like you would a hotel, for example. But the benefit of that is the principal would then have a record of everybody in the building when they entered and when they left. Of course, some teachers don't like to ever leave, if you've ever been a principal, but that's another issue. Other replacements include switches, projectors, interactive projectors, servers, access points to sustain the LAN and the WLAN infrastructure. And I do want to mention about the safety and security upgrades. I want to go back to that point. We have piloted now at both maintenance and the ITTC, that program that I was just telling you about, the swipe card program. And so we wanted to start there to see how well it worked out. It is working out well, and then we'll expand that and roll that out to the schools on a sequential basis. And you can see the details of this in your booklet when you get the opportunity on pages 20 through 23. Let's move on to maintenance. I always make fun of Mr. Hockaday and say maintenance isn't very sexy, but Mr. Hockaday has proved me wrong year after year. So, especially this year with the renovation of Cortland High School being one of the top maintenance items that we are working on. Also, we're examining repurposing existing classroom space in conjunction with the planning the plan capacity study suggestions. For example, at Massaponax High School, we're looking at more efficient student movement in the hallways and maximizing our existing classroom spaces. Of course, you're familiar with the lighting upgrades to LED throughout the division, including this building, parking lot repairs, roof replacements and repairs. And if you turn the page quickly, HVAC upgrades, plumbing system upgrades, carpet and flooring improvements, and boiler repairs. And the comprehensive security aspect in maintenance is the architectural access control, which we still have not quite finished in every building, but we still, at this point, only have the more complicated projects left. A majority, as you know, of our schools do have the architectural access control. And of course, the fire alarm upgrades are part of that as well. And again, you can check this out when you have the opportunity by school, by year, on pages 24 through 22 in the CIP booklet. Now let's talk a little bit about student enrollment projections. Come on, fingers. This slide shows the 5-year student enrollment forecast, and you're starting the first graph, the first bar there is our actual FY18 numbers as of October 1st. And you can see a total of 23,814. This represents an increase of approximately a little bit over 200 students from the preceding year. So here's what we have been slightly struggling with over the last several years. We know that the Board of Supervisors has approved numerous new housing developments. The hard part was trying to bring those in on a realistic schedule when they actually would be occupied. And we're starting to see for the first time, as you can see when you look at the next several years here, our projected enrollment rising approximately, we believe, 2.6% for the next 5 years. So in between FY19 and FY23, we're forecasting an approximate 2.6% increase, which would be moderate growth. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Phil Traer for his work in projecting enrollment and also for his work with the County Planning Office of Wanda Parish in particular. We're very appreciative of the cooperation that she and her department have shown us over the years and again this year. Now, Ms. Gaines, I believe we had a 10-year projection slide, or, okay. In your hard copies, I'm going to flip the order. I know there's a little bit of confusion when I jump to the other one. This actually shows you, when I first got here in 2013, 2014, you can see that we had 23,773 kids. And then you'll see, starting in 2015, 2016 school year, and then the following school year, last year, 2016, 2017, we actually had decreases in enrollment. And that was because of the lower birth rates in the county from 5 years prior. Now you can see in 2017, 2018, our current school year, that 23,814 figure, which represents specifically 222 more students as of October 1st than what we had last year as of October 1st. And I like this graph because it kind of gives you a perspective and it kind of shows you the difficulty in projecting enrollment when you have so many undecideds, yet you know that it's coming. So I hope that maybe shed some light on some of the things that we face as we try to give you accurate predictions of where we're going and what we think we're going to see the following fall. And finally, the CIP timeline. Of course, our presentation tonight is a proposed draft. On February the 12th, 2018, we'll be seeking your approval of the CIP, and then the CIP would be included as part of the school board budget for adoption on May 14th, 2018. So hope that gives you a pretty good snapshot of where we are. Any questions? I didn't understand.
Thank you. That's what a PA system is for, right?
We pay dearly for it, too.
How many housing units has the county board approved?
I think it's 15,000. We're seeing that the certain developers that have been approved, for example, the Walton Group, actually had a change in their leadership in California. They seem to be putting the brakes on 2 of their projects here, or at least slowing down somewhat. And that kind of thing can happen. But I think you're right with your approximate number.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Epico. I have a few questions on each of the sections, but they're very small. They're not major questions. So, for transportation for the bus cameras, is that interior cameras or exterior cameras?
Those are interior cameras, and typically 3 to the interior. We did at one point work somewhat with the sheriff department about the stop arm camera. We ran into an ordinance issue, a legislative issue, which eventually was cleared up by the state legislature, so we may revisit that. In the past, we have taken certain days of the week and just taken a survey of how many cars pass school buses when they're stopped with the lights, and you would be unfortunately amazed by what those numbers look like. So that would be something that we would be interested in partnering with the sheriff's department if they're interested in doing so again.
Do we know if there's grants for that?
I'm not sure, but if there are, we're going to find them.
Okay, that's good. Okay, next one was, just wanted to mention the swipe card pass entries. I use it and we have it in my school. And it's really nice because with, if teachers want to come in kind of off hours, they're able to get into the building. And it's been very helpful. So I like that idea.
You're one of those 24-hour teachers, right?
We're not going to talk about it.
That's good enough. Thank you.
And then, okay, maintenance. This might be a Mr. Hockaday question, or you, or anybody.
The way you're looking, it looks like a Hockaday question. It looks like a tough one.
What projects are we going to be doing this summer? And how are we on timing with our shortened summertime?
I'll take a stab at that, and then I'll let Mr. Hockaday kind of fill in the details. If you look at the sheet for 2019, you're going to see it's a little sparser than normal because of the 6-week summer. The main project that we're focusing on, of course, is the Cortland renovation, and that is our priority. That doesn't mean everything else doesn't get done, but we're deliberately paring back for that 6 weeks because we're trying to be realistic and get the job done the way that we think it needs to be done. And Mr. Hockaday, you might want to add to that. I'll get out of your way if you do.
Mr. Hockaday, do you have anything? Because if you don't, that's okay. Oh, there you go.
I would just add that we have some safety security projects that we're looking at doing that we can do in that time frame. We're already working with the vendors to set that up so we can start that process the day school is let out. One of the other projects is Bass Pines High School. We're going to work on some of those hallways. So it's everything we've done or going to do are things that we can get done in less than a 6-week time period, which isn't much, but we're going to get as many done as we can.
If I may, I appreciate the 6-week time frame. I believe it's at least 8. I understand that it's going to be a shorter summer, but I'd like it not to be even shorter. That's okay. That stage was set by Mr. Upperco with the 6 weeks. I also want to let the board know, just in relation to the question about planning for summer maintenance projects, we've really created a comprehensive process across all the departments. of a calendar to coordinate, and we've already started on that as a school system, trying to plan for the earlier start. And so it really goes beyond just the maintenance projects. It's really in every area of operation, including instruction. So I just wanted to provide that.
Thank you. One more question. We went up from last year, 222 students for our October 1. What did we have projected? What is the difference in what we had projected for this school year? And do you have that number, what we had projected for this school year's in last year's CIP?
I do have that number. There is a graph that shows, it's kind of complicated, but under the enrollment section, page number 31, you can see the actual from this year, 10/1/2017 in red, compared to the actual from last year, and by school, the additional or reduced number of students in that comparison. And then in the blue, you have the projected enrollment by school, and you have the actual number as that stacks up to the projected number. And we're off by about I think it was 1.2%. We were off by about 275 students, and we were off, we under-projected by 275 students.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair? Mr. Apico, was mentioned, 15,000 housing units out there. Are we monitoring the occupancy permits? Because that's really the way to know, to get ahead of the curve, if it's at all possible, to get ahead of the curve, but to help us in our projections, if we know how occupancy permits over, a 12-month period, from the same time frame to the same time frame, so you get an accurate measurement of, how those permits, not the building permits, but the occupancy permits.
Mr. Trayer and I met with Ms. Parrish in the county planning department, and we meet periodically. I meet monthly with her typically, and we compare both occupancy and building permits, and then the overall county growth rate as well. It's a tricky process, but again, we work together, and I think with Mr. Trayer's expertise, we're going to get closer than that 275 this year that we were off by.
And the follow-up to that would be, when you're looking at the actuals on page 31, the impact at the elementary level versus the middle versus the high school, when they're tracking the occupancy permits, are they tracking that by, I think they do it more by subdivision, where we would have to look at it by attendance line, but at least we could guess, based on subdivision, in which attendance line they fall within elementary, middle, or high. And that way, it would give you a better basis for trying to develop a projection.
Correct. And Mr. Trayer, I'll go ahead and let you respond.
High school, and we have broken out by school. On elementary school, we have one more year of a light kindergarten coming in, which is about 300 students less, projected less than the fifth grade that's leaving. So that area, that section of the student population is actually going down a bit, but on the secondary level, it is rising. It starts to rise periodically thereafter. We have a total of 14,042 housing units projected, with an absorption rate we're figuring to be 5,237 students. Luckily, some of the larger subdivisions are out there on the 5, 6, 7 year mark. They're not in the near future, so that does save some heartache from that perspective. From a secondary level, I think Cortland, Massaponax, the usual suspects in the growth, is what you can look forward to seeing. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Good job.
On the bus cameras, are we talking about replacements or new installations? Or
We're
both?
talking about replacements for the most part.
Okay, so they
When
all,
we order a new bus, the cameras are part of what come with it.
so we don't have buses currently that don't have cameras?
We don't.
Okay.
All buses have cameras. Some do not have 3 cameras.
Okay,
The older buses have usually 1.
okay.
The newer buses have one on the side of the driver as well as the front and back. And Mr. Forrest, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
That's absolutely right. At this time, we are actually starting to purchase buses that have 4 camera placements on them,
Okay,
which will have a camera on the bulkhead at the front, bulkhead at the rear, a entry door camera that is to the left of the driver, and then 1 mid-bus. So that's what we're moving towards. We do have some older units that just have the single camera on the front bulkhead.
so we have coverage, this will improve coverage and replace cameras that need to be replaced?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me, the Cortland dollars, does that include the classroom edition, even though it hasn't been bid out yet? It's my understanding that's a separate,
I'm going to let Mr. Hockaday answer that question.
Okay.
We're still waiting at this point, and you're going to find at the next December meeting that we'll be bringing bids forth
okay,
for you, and we're hopeful that those bids will not exceed what our estimates are going to be for those. That will impact the decision in terms of that expansion, but I'll let Mr. Hockaday kind of add his expertise on that one.
okay, thank you.
We have estimated the full amount of the bid, including the alternative, so that price includes the addition. So it could come in depends on what the bid is. We have to determine that at that time, but we wanted to allot enough funding in the project
Great,
for the complete project.
great, thank you so much. That's it for me.
Yeah, just a few things, thank you. How many of those buses, new bus purchases will be add-on? Or are they all replacement?
How many will be new and how many will be replacement? Is that what you're,
Yes, sir.
what you're asking?
Put another way,
Mr.
yes.
Forrest, I'm going to refer that to you.
Are you asking for fiscal year 19?
Yes.
Okay, as far as replacement buses, 24 77 passenger, 6 special needs buses, 1 Head Start bus, and then additional buses, we'll purchase 1 77 and 2 special needs buses.
Okay, thank
So
you.
3 additional buses.
Yes, sir. That's good. All right, no problem there. HVAC upgrades. After this fiscal year's CIP investment into HVAC, how many schools will be left behind? Or in other words, how many older systems are in place
How
now?
many do
and
we
in the
have
year?
left on the HVAC
Yes, sir.
cycle? I'm going to refer that to Mr. Hockaday, but I do know that if you look at the project list on the maintenance side there, it
Yes.
should tell you that, and those are keyed in based on
Okay.
life cycle expectancy and anticipated, life
Understand.
cycle. So,
And those are on 24 to 29.
Thank you. But what's the approximate number?
Well, Mr. Twig, I think the best way that I can answer that is, it's, that will be a never-ending cycle, depending on the year of the school. As we look forward, maybe out of this CIP, but in the next 5 to 6 years, we have schools that are going to be at that
Rotation.
point where we need to go in and do a complete renovation. So
Okay.
that's going to be something that's never ending in the life cycle. And a good point to that is if you look at Spottsylvania High School, it's hard for a lot of people to think that that school's 25 years old now. But that equipment is that old, so we need to start looking at putting that into a CIP, just like we would RUS or anything else. So the answer is that it's going to be a continuing cycle, depending on the life of the equipment, age of the equipment.
Okay, and one more question for you, if I may. LED project, is that complete?
LED projects are are continuing throughout this entire CIP. We've placed the ones that we think, that we know that will get the biggest savings from energy-wise. We've placed those in the upcoming years, and that's going to be a cycle that we'll go through until everything is LED.
Got it. And then one last question on the cameras for the buses. Have they, if transportation can answer the question, have they had a positive effect as far as things like fights and intimidations and bus driver reports of problems? Or is that a better question for another time? It's okay if it is.
No, I think they have certainly helped with the administration of discipline on the buses, to be able to go and to pull that
Pinpoint.
footage and to review what has happened. It certainly is an asset for the administration to be able to go back and look at that footage and evaluate what took place.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Gramp, if I may, can I follow up with Mr. Hockaday regarding a couple of Mr. Twig's questions? One, Mr. Hockaday, if you could just share, and again, even if it's an approximate, how many of our school sites are receiving an HVAC replacement on this bond?
I believe we're only looking at 3 through this bond, and they're not 3 complete renovations, but there are 3 large HVAC projects through the next 5 years.
And how many HVAC projects, or how many of our schools have had at least a substantial HVAC project done over the last 10 to 15 years?
Probably over the last 10 to 15, we're probably looking at 8 complete renovations.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up on that because I thought that might be good at giving a number. And with the LED lighting, do you mind, again, knowing that we're looking at where there might be a savings in terms of energy efficiency, but could you also share with the board the consideration of LED lighting for just, again, in layman's terms, through maintenance, as we're trying to get instructional benefit from it as well?
Yes, sir. Well, there's, as Dr. Baker said, there's several advantages to it beyond the energy savings and the financial savings. And one of the benefits is time as well. But on the instructional side, there's been a lot of studies done. You can look at studies anywhere from a university in Delaware to Oklahoma to California. What they've seen is, especially for special need children, that the light is more calming. It helps on being able to focus. They've also done a study that shows that when in a setting with LED, children are able to retain knowledge better. And part of that goes back to the focus, and it's the way that the light can be maintained, dimmed, controlled, however you want to say it. So it has a lot of instructional benefits that I don't know that we can actually put a price tag on. I think anytime we can look at anything that's an upgrade on the facility side that's going to better education, the education wins out every time. So that's always the way we try to.
No, I appreciate that. And again, because I thought, again, Mr. Twig's question on the number of schools, could you just share with the board again approximately how many of our facilities, our sites, have either a partial or a full LED lighting installation?
By the end of, by July 1, we'll have 6 sites completed. And if everything goes according to plan, by the end of this CIP goes through cycle, we'll be looking at somewhere around 13 to 14 sites that are completed.
I have one question.
I would too.
Thank you. We have a significant percentage of our children are special needs, and I know that's my understanding is that has been increasing. And I wonder, how have their needs fit into this plan here? Have you had to make special accommodations anywhere? Have we done things to especially meet needs that are arising there, and what are they?
I think if you're looking at maintenance projects, whenever you renovate a building, you have to bring that building up to current ADA standards. So that would be one area that's taken into consideration. In addition, with the architectural control projects that we still have to do, part of that should also improve the accessibility for those in, for example, non-ambulatory children. And I think Mr. Hockeney just explained with the LED lighting, one of the benefits would be what he just explained. In particular, I think it particularly affects students with autism. It improves their educational environment with the LED lighting. In terms of buses, we have increased the number of special needs buses to meet the needs of our population. In fact, those buses are actually a little bit more expensive per unit than the regular buses because of the lift. But because of our growing numbers, we have to meet that need. And so that's been, I think Mr. Forrest has taken that into consideration very much on his new requests. Technology-wise, I don't know if Mr. Zakari might want to add something there, but I'm not a technology expert by any stretch. But Mr. Zakari, I don't know if you're prepared to answer that question, but I'm sure that from assistive technology standpoint that there are some devices that are in the CIP that will help students in need as well.
We have to give everyone an opportunity to speak, you see, so.
Thanks, Mr. Uppercuff.
Sure. I could tell you were bored back there. So.
No, yeah, some of the devices and things that would be replaced throughout the CIP are things that are used with assistive technology. So a lot of, we sort of reach across all aspects of the school division once we start dealing with the technology. So there definitely is some of the replacements and even making sure that the infrastructure is there so the devices that they have are able to connect and they're able to access the information and the applications that they need.
One additional related question, I think, is what is the federal commitment to financing some of these changes in the special needs area? Do you have any idea?
If you can figure that one out, I would love to hear it. I know that there is some commitment. It is woefully not enough, frankly. I don't know, Ms. Richardson, I'm going to put you on the spot if there's anything that you might be able to add there, but
currently, the federal law says it's going to fund about 40% of special ed services, and I think we're sitting at maybe about 18% funding. Is that right, LaShawn?
I think that's
12
too high.
to 18. Yeah,
I think it's
12%. And I can tell you, this is the season for December 1. That's Friday. That's where we do our data capture date. As of close of business today, we have an increase of 150 students with disabilities across the school division. So our count has gone up from 2881 from 2016 to now we're sitting at 3,031 students in our school division.
That's a growing need then, and
Yes.
I understood that the commitment is 40%.
40%.
And we're actually receiving about 12.5%.
Yes, sir.
And who makes up that balance? The local taxpayers largely?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fair to say that at this point it's no longer a commitment, but a proposition for consideration.
One thing real quick, I'm sorry. This is just for Ms. Richardson. Your number, I know this is not, but you gave me a number on the 15th of November
I
of
did.
2987, and now we're at 3,031
Yes, ma'am.
in 2 weeks.
Yes, and
My
we still
goodness.
have about 12 documents open for meetings to take place between now and November 30th. So our count is based on finalized, individualized educational plans.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I only have one question from the CIP, and that is because of our recent acquisition of custodial services that we now took on, was there anything that changed, or is that all small enough to where it comes out of maintenance operating budget?
Most all the costs for the custodial services will be out of operating cost. We had some funds that we had some equipment that we needed to purchase, and we've been able to cover that at this point. So moving forward, it shouldn't affect the CIP in any way.
Perfect. Any more CIP-related questions? Okay, we will move on to item 6. Mrs. Gaines, would you like to share with us the preliminary budget projections?
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, school board members. If I can draw your attention to your budget recap, just want to look at some of the things you were able to accomplish with the current year budget. You do recall you were able to do a 2% COLA for all staff. That was about $3.5 million. The starting teacher salary, we're now at $41,500. You also had a significant increase in your VRS rate. That was about $2.3 million. We also had an increase in our health insurance rate of 5%, and then for the employer, 5.3. The next slide, it basically shows you how we were able to debundle dental and medical. Basically, the employee has picked up 25% of the dental rate, and the employer 75%. Then we were able to increase the daily sub rate by $5. That was $116,000. You were also able to increase your stipends by 5%. Keep in mind, this still does not fully restore. This was about $56,000. To fully restore, we still need another 2%. In order to balance the budget, you did eliminate 12.5 positions. But the good news, with the increase in student enrollment, we were able to increase the teaching positions by 6 in total. And then finally, you did add a new high school stipend. In terms of non-comp and programs, overall, you will see that you did reduce your non-compensation before reallocations of $2 million. You also were able to lower your athletic fee from $75 per sport to $50 per sport. You were able to restore your cafeteria monitor program. You have 2 cafeteria aides at your elementary schools. That was about $188,000. You were also able to restore a portion of your pilot activity bus, both at Post Oak and Spottsylvania High. And then to balance the budget, we used $1 million of the health reserve. Bless you. So then what Dr. Baker wanted to show you today is, despite the funding challenges and the fact that we've done a lot of heavy lifting at the beginning, when you go back to FY15, you as a school board, you were able to provide a step in a 1% COLA. Then you were able to give a 3% COLA in FY16, FY17 a 2% COLA, and then 18 2%. While we continue to have our mandatory costs outpace our increases in revenue, you did have a health insurance increase of 2% in 15, 0 in 16, a double-digit increase in 17, 11.8%. And then for FY18, you will see again the 5.3%. You also had to look at your VRS rate in FY15, 15.56%. It did go down slightly in 16 to 15.12. It went back up again in 17 to 15.77. And then we had a huge increase in FY18 to 17.55%. We also wanted to show you what your trends look like in terms of your net FTEs, your full-time equivalents. For the budget in FY15, you added 8 positions. In 16, you added 61, quite a few of those are special ed. FY17, you had added 28. And then for 18, you reduced 12, but we were able to restore 6. One of the themes that you will see throughout the entire process, we continue to have reallocations in terms of your non-compensation budget. And then if you look at stipends, again, when we were back in the recession, in total, stipends had been reduced by 20%. You were able to restore 10% in 15, another 5% in 16, no change in 17, although initially you did make an attempt. 18, you were able to restore 5%. Keep in mind, we still need another 2% to fully restore. For your sub rates, there was no change in 15. 16, you had variations between $5 to $10 increase. We remained flat in 17, and then for 18, you were able to increase your daily rates by $5. Again here, in 18, you were able to restore your cafeteria aids. Then in 18, a partial restoration of your activity bus program. And then we wanted to show you what the trend has been for your activity fees. I think activity fees were put in place back in 2010, but we were able to bring it down in 16 to $75. It remained the same in FY17, and then for FY18, you brought it down to $50. Keep in mind, in order to fully eliminate the activity fee, it will cost about $172,000. Just want to put that out for you to have that number. And then when you look back in 2014, there were a lot of reductions made early on. Here you see elimination of 25 FTEs. You had wanted to add 14 new positions, but because the funding was not there, you had to remove those new positions. Again, you revised your CIP to reduce your debt service. Also, what you did in FY15 and 14 was to reduce your school and department non-comp budget lines. In 16, we continued to make reductions. You also used $2.8 million of your health insurance reserve, and you also had an early retirement program that in that particular year, it did save us $1.5 million. And then when you look at FY17, you were able to you had to remove 33 new proposed positions, again, reallocations of non-comp, revisions of your CIP to lower your debt service, and then you eliminated 4 existing teaching positions. And that brings us to the current year of 2018. Again, with those 12.5 positions that have been eliminated, keep in mind those were 4 custodian positions that would have gone over to the third party, but we're bringing those positions back. 5 of those were teaching positions, and 2.5 were clerical. We did have the employees and the retirees pick up 25% of the dental. We also had an opportunity to lower our health insurance costs. With the renegotiations of the prescription drug cost and increasing our stop loss, that saved us well over $1 million. To close the gap, you use $1 million of your health reserve, and then we continue to reduce non-comp before reallocations. So that's kind of like a summary of FY18, and going back to give you some trends.
Can I ask there? We did reduce non-comp comp budget lines in 2018, but we were able to use some of the carryover to give some money back to the schools for non-comp?
Correct. So for the schools, based on your meeting tomorrow night with the Board of Supervisors, elementary schools were allocated $5,000, your middle schools $10,000, and then your high schools $15,000. So we're optimistic about tomorrow.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Gaines, how are we doing on our health reserve now? Because I see, we used in 2016 $2.8 million, and last year $1 million out of our health reserve. So how are we doing in that fund?
The fund is still looking pretty promising in that when we end the plan year for this year, we ended $2 million to the good. So we'll be adding to that. The last time I checked, I want to say it was like 9.9 million. So in terms of that, we have been able to keep that balance pretty steady, especially the fact that we ended this year pretty good.
Can we continue to the FY19 budget assumptions?
Okay. So that brings us to FY19. And what we wanted to do today was just to give you a few assumptions. First, looking on the revenue side, and then we'll talk a little bit about the expense side. Now, the beauty of the fact that we have 4 main revenue sources, when you look at FY19, this will be the first year of the biennium. And when you reflect back to the first year of the biennium for the last year, we did receive an increase from the state of $4 million. So we want to continue to be optimistic when we can, but we do know that we have had an opportunity to talk to some of the House of Delegates, and basically what we've heard so far is that it would be best and if we just stay level, but we're hopeful that we'll receive some increases. One thing that we do have working in our favor, of course, is the fact that we're seeing a projected increase in our ADM. That should bring you some additional dollars, $5,000 per student. Also, at 5/11 today, we did receive the local composite index. So what that basically means is that it looks at the local ability to pay, the locality's ability to pay. The current index is 0.6317. So whenever that goes up, that means that you lose funding. When it goes down, that means that you get additional funding from the state. 0.3617. Yes, sorry about that. Yes. So 0.3617. And in looking at the numbers that came through the email today, it is going to go up slightly to 0.3627. So with that, we will potentially lose some state revenue, but it could have been much worse than that. When you look at our trend for the last 10 years of our local composite index, the number that we see here, it is the 3rd highest that it has been in the last 10 years. So we wanted to point that out. It does look at things such as your taxable retail sales, your true value of real property, as well as your adjusted gross income. So those are key factors in the state's formula that you need to be aware of. Then when you look at the local revenue, you will recall that when you look at the budget right now, we have ongoing revenue of $123.7. We do have one-time funding, $333,222. So that $300-something, we're going to lose that going in. But again, as you prepare your budget and you present, we will be making the case for some additional funding based on the request that you'll be seeing from the various departments. In terms of federal revenue, this year we already know that we've lost some monies. So here I put to be determined, because on the food service side, when you look at our free and reduced, you could receive additional federal revenues there. But on your title funds, you could receive less. So you could receive increases in one area and decreases in others. And then on the other revenues, I said to be determined as well, because when you look here, it's your cafeteria funding, but it's also your fleet. And whenever you continue to have mandatory increases with the fleet program, we may need to start to have an automatic increase in the rate just to keep up with the cost. So again, that will go to the Joint Fleet Maintenance Committee for consideration. So those are just some things we want you to be aware of. So that is on the revenue side. Now, on the expense side, we wanted to point out here, again, in looking at a potential employee pay raise, looking at the 5-year trend, which has been very positive. I know that you've wanted to give more, but we've had to stay within the fiscal constraints. In terms of VRS, one of the things that we've heard potentially, according to the VRS Board of Trustees, is that the rate could decline from 17.55% to 16.88%. Unfortunately, this is not millions. If we save anything, maybe a couple hundreds of thousands, but not a lot, but we'll take whatever we can get. In looking at the health insurance rate, just a national trend, you're basically looking at a 10% increase. Dr. Baker did meet with Anthem, and he had requested that we have a projection both December 15th and January 15th, so that you'll see those numbers when he presents his budget in January. And then we always get another rate increase sometime in March before you all adopt your budget in May, just to make sure we have the latest and greatest. The other piece that I wanted to point out here, when you look at your state health plan, we have been involved in some analysis. They were looking to do a state plan, and based on the analysis that was done by our benefit specialists, when you look at our Key Care Expanded, which is one of our most robust plans, and you compare that to the state's plan, actually, when you compare premiums, we are getting a better buy at a lower cost. So at this point, staff does not feel that it's beneficial to recommend that we consider the state plan, because you already have a great plan. It does not help us financially. So we did look at those premiums there. In terms of programs, again, some of the feedback that we've gotten from the Cafeteria Monitor Program, the elementary schools love that. We've even had some middle schools ask, if that's possible. But we know at the elementary school, there has been a need, and that program has been working well, just trying to work better to make sure that we have continuity and consistency with those positions. Here with the activity bus, based on the board's desire and Dr. Baker's recommendation, there could be an opportunity to expand that program, especially from an academic standpoint. There may be an opportunity for some additional instructional programs, and then also looking at to continuing to either reduce or eliminate the athletic fee. So we did want you to be aware of that cost, which will be $170,000. Again, just looking at our increases in enrollment as well as our count that you heard from Ms. Richardson, there may be a need for some additional FTEs. We'll be bringing some recommendations with Dr. Baker's budget there. And then also with the debt service increase based on the CIP plan that you saw today, that would be an increase of $1.5 million if you approved it as is for FY19. So we want you to be aware of the operating impact. So those are some of the assumptions from both the revenue side and the expense side. And then lastly, Dr. Baker wanted us to share with you basically the employee compensation focus group that he implemented about 3 years ago. And this committee is actually co-led by myself and my colleague, Ms. Colbert. When you look at the goals of this group, basically, we want them to understand the importance of recruiting and retaining high-quality staff. Also, we want them to recognize that we do have fiscal constraints, and then we're soliciting their suggestions in terms of long-term compensation and benefit strategies. And the key word that we've been focusing on with them is that it has to be sustainable. So with that, when we had our first meeting, I'll skip to that page. It's 30 participants in total, 19 who are returning, 11 who are new participants. You're looking at school and department administrators, teachers, and support staff. And also we have someone that's a part of the school board's advisory committee that's on that particular focus group. In total, we were going to have 4 meetings. We had our first 2. The first one was October 30th. Then we had another meeting on November 20th. We'll be meeting again with them December 18th, and then again January 22nd, prior to Dr. Baker presenting. When we had our first meeting, we reviewed with them the Evergreen study, and we also shared with them an overview of our health insurance benefits. When we had our meeting in November, we started to dive into some of the solutions coming from the Evergreen study. Basically 3 recommendations there. One, to bring the employees to minimum. The other one was the range penetration, and then the classification date study. And then they started to brainstorm on some of the potential options for your consideration. We talked about last year how The team was working to create a 5-year health insurance action plan. You can see what we were able to accomplish for this year's budget. You renegotiated your prescription drug cost. You also revised your stop-loss coverage from $150,000 to $200,000. You debundled your medical and dental, and then employees and retirees assumed 25% of the dental rate. Again, that saved us about $1.5 million. And basically what we did with those funds, in turn, you're putting those towards your salary increases and your other priorities. Some of the recommendations that we've heard from the committee so far this year in their brainstorming was, when you look at our different plans, keep in mind that 75% of our employees are on our health plan. When you look at the 3 plans that we have, 66% are basically on the top plan. And then when you look at Key Care 200, we basically have about 6% on that plan, not many. So one of the things we talked about was replacing the Key Care 200 plan with a high deductible health plan coupled with a health savings account. And we'll continue to have those discussions at our next meeting, which will be in December. And then for Key Care 500, we have about 29% on that plan. One of the main things that we continue to hear from Anthem, and as we work with our peers, is that the school board needs to continue to work towards modernizing our health plan. Because when you don't do that, you create something called adverse selection, where you have more individuals come onto your plan, which does create a higher associated cost. So again, this committee has been very instrumental in making recommendations. Anything you want to add, Ms. Colbert? No, you go. Okay. So that basically covers the recap for 18 and giving you some highlights for FY19.
Start up at that end again. Dr. Baker, is anything you want to add to that?
No, I just, this was intended to be a concise summary of the board's work in adopting the last several budgets, but again, I think you see some of the consistent challenges that are going to remain as we move forward. I do think that Ms. Gaines, myself, others are open to any other questions or clarification you need before moving on to the budget dates.
Anybody have any questions or clarification? Mr. Braswell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Gaines, when we were discussing health insurance last year, there were several courses of action that we were massaging in out years in order to receive some possible savings. Can you, and I know I'm catching you a little bit off guard, but can you flesh out those courses of action again so that we can consider that and with our future deliberations? So I'll just stop there right now and let you go to that.
Okay. Based on our discussion last year, we basically had listed 10 coming out of the committee. The first one was to reduce the prescription drug cost through renegotiations, and you all have accomplished that one. The next one was to have employees pick up a portion of the dental benefits, and staff is not recommending these at this time, so I want to be very clear. So these are just from last year, right? So item number 3, in looking at maybe assessing a surcharge for employee dependents, spouses, and children, if they're able to participate in a health insurance plan with their employer. So that was one option. And quite frankly, this is something that's very common now when you look at the private sector. So that was number 3. Number 4 was to consider keeping the Key Care Expanded Plan, which most employees enjoy. 67% are on this plan. But consider raising the employer contributions, because basically that would be the only way that the school board would be able to save funds, either to have the employer contributions go up or drastically revise your plan design. Those are the only 2 options. Then the next one was to eliminate Key Care Expanded and offer a lower employee and employer monthly premium. But coupled with that was the consideration of maybe moving towards something called Health Keepers, and it's basically similar to an HMO plan. But the major difference here is that you would not need to have deferrals. Number two, in working with Anthem, if we're going to move forward in this direction, we would not be ready for 19, but potentially 2020, and there could be an estimated savings anywhere from 1 to 2 million. But the key would be to have a network campaign whereby we're working with the doctors and the primary care physicians to make sure that the facilities are a part of the network.
Okay.
And that would take about 2 or 3 years to do that one. Another one was to implement the high deductible health plan coupled with the health savings plan. This is an area where the focus group is moving towards, so this may be something that we could do for 19. And then we had talked about maybe implementing an on-site clinic, and that's many years down the road, and then just continuing with the employee wellness opportunities.
Yeah, on that too, on the health insurance, I'm glad we have some courses of action to consider for savings, but when I look at health insurance, I look at myself in the mirror as I look at technology. I'm very reluctant to change with technology, and because I'm that way, I recognize that I lose out on opportunities because of my fear of it. And there's a lot of employees that are very comfortable with PPO plans, and you're right, adverse selection is a significant problem that if it doesn't get us now, it will get us later as America starts the process of aging. And so we need to be able to move people into health plans that are a bit more innovative, especially health savings plans, and even if we have to offer incentives, significant incentives, to move people in that direction so we can realize some long-term savings. And we have to be deliberate about doing that. If we continue to do the same thing year in and year out, we are going to set ourselves up for failure. And so I think as we look in the out years, like, as I say, with people like myself, I need help with changes in technology. They're going to need help in understanding that this is not a bad thing, that it's a good thing. And I think employee education is really huge on, especially with our seasoned teachers, if you will, that it's okay. So that's one piece that I had. And then the other thing that I was thinking about is, I believe you said on the front of sunsetting activity fees, it would cost about $172,000, which is really, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a significant amount of money. And I don't know if this is a time where we would argue or say that, I think I see that's later in the budget, so I'll hold that particular comment. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a part in here where we give an opportunity for guidance, so I'll hold off on that particular piece. But that was my comment about the health insurance. I think as a board and as a division, we're going to position ourselves in out years in a lot better position by being very innovative and taking advantage of the health savings plans and things of that nature, and we have to start educating our employees so that we can realize benefit from it.
And if I could just follow up to that, Mr. Braswell, that's an excellent point. When we met with Anthem on November the 20th, that was one of the things we had talked about. If we begin to move in this direction, what additional support could they provide? And we talked about going around the school division and the various communities and providing that information sessions that you spoke of. So that'll be critical.
Is there any competition for Anthem?
Yes, sir. I want to say about maybe almost 8 years ago now, we had went out with the county initially to basically have leverage in terms of the buying power. With that, we were able to save $300,000. Most recently, we went out maybe 2 or 3 years ago, again with Anthem, coupled with the county, We did have several firms to bid. We had like Anthem, you have your Cignas, you have your United Healthcare, and one of the things that you would notice with Anthem that stands them apart is that they are able to offer the huge discounts. So yes, we do go through an RFP process, and we'll be going through that again another 2 to 3 years.
Thanks.
One thing I noticed that's interesting, because last year we talked about one of the things was an HMO possibility. The other thing was that I found interesting in your earlier comments, that we had talked about this last year, we were waiting to see what kind of state plan was coming about to see if that was going to give us any option that would help to reduce our cost. It kind of surprised me when you said that when you looked at it, there were no real savings coming from a state plan, and the state would have the benefit of the highest N number to be able to draw that by a larger pool, therefore drive the cost down. So it really surprised me that that's not happening, which may say that our number is as significant in terms of participation as if we were comparing to the state. The state's not going to give us anything better, so our N number is comparable to the state pool. That kind of surprises me. That we're that similar, and there's no real savings coming from in that regard.
Right. And I think also, Dr. Meyer, it's going to be predicated upon those school divisions who completed the survey, who provided their claims data, who provided their premiums data, and just maybe in terms of those who have responded, that's what resulted in the end result in terms of the plan design and the premiums. And I think, too, it just goes to the fact that we do have a very robust plan, but it's also very affordable. So I think that gives credit to the school board and the school division. But we were, too, hoping that if you had the state plan, at a minimum, you would save funds. And if you're not going to save funds, it's not going to be advantageous.
So it puts us in the same pickle we're in right now this year, as we're trying to find a way that where we can drive our health care costs down. When you were commenting about the 10 options, and I can't remember if I heard correctly when you said the employer share increasing?
Going down.
Oh, going down. Because I was commenting to Ms. Shelley that going down or going up?
Right. Yeah, in order for us to save funds, the employer must go down, employee must go up. And then another way that you can garner those savings, if you revise your plan design, which basically means that both the employee and the employer will save. However, the employee will pay when they access the services.
Isn't that the trend? A kind of rhetorical question, but isn't that what we're seeing in the different plan options, in that we tried on the going from 200 to 500, where the employee could have savings on the premium side, but their deductible and everything were higher because they really weren't anticipating using it, or only, not as much. Is that not part of the design that we're going to have to go to in order to help drive our costs down?
I would say yes, but I think it also goes back to the point that Mr. Braswell said earlier. Even when we surveyed the employee compensation focus group for the employees that are on that particular focus group, even myself, people just don't like to take a risk, but what you have to do, you really have to take the time to educate, and once they educate and see, really, it is advantageous to go ahead and get the high deductible health plan, because that plan also is portable wherever you go, and also you pay less, and you only pay when you actually access the services.
Now, the other comparable piece that I think we need to be cognizant of is, how are the other divisions approaching this as well? Because we're trying to compete with them, and our health insurance benefit is a factor.
Correct.
But if our neighbors are trying to do the same kind of thing, then maybe when we reach out there to a health savings account or higher deductibles, because the others are doing it, it will not be detrimental to us.
Right. So one of the things we did do, we did reach out to Stafford I want to say it was several months ago, our staff went over and met with their staff, because one of the things that we had learned is that they too were trying to combine efforts with the county like we did several years ago, when we initially saved that $300,000. But one of the things that they did, they were trying to make the plan design the same, but the premium rates are still different. And one of the things they did do, they did add a high deductible health savings account. So I do strongly believe that that's something that we should consider for 19, especially with that coming from the Employee Compensation Focus Group.
And I'd like to jump in on this too. One of the advantages, the thing that you mentioned again that resonates is the adverse selection. Just because you have a larger pool, we're finding out that that's not turning out any significant savings in premiums. So there's always this desire to consolidate, but we're already at a point of marginal return. It's not going to have any impact because we have to deal with adverse selection. So that's number one. And then the other part is that when you have the product, the old platform was raise the deductible, and if I raise the deductible, I'd say premium. But the product has to be more innovative. For example, I have a health savings account. A lot of people don't realize that you actually get to control that premium that you're saving. And because you get to control it, if you never use it and you're ready to retire, now you can use that premium to buy a Medicare supplement plan or a long-term care policy or something to that nature. And so if people knew that, they would be able to control their premium dollars and have positive control over it other than just paying the difference in a high deductible, that might eliminate some of the fear of approaching innovative products like that. Whereas right now, you pay a premium, and at the end of the year, you lose it whether you use it or not.
Ms. Gaines, the employer portion of spouses coverage, is that the same as it is? Is it 70? Is that same across the board, or do you pay a different rate for spouses?
So when you look at it, we basically have 4 tiers. You have employee only, you have employee plus one, you have family shared, and you have family. One of the things that we did notice when we received our annual report from Anthem this year and the year before, one of the things that they did share is that with the adverse selection in terms of all the factors, it is spouses and dependents. But in terms of the shared family, the family, you do pay the same rate.
So the county is paying 75% of the premium, no matter what the premium is?
Okay, so for example, what I did, I looked at Key Care Expanded, and if you want to kind of look at the employer contribution and the employee, for Key Care Expanded, but before I share this, let me give some history. For many years, we were with Local Choice, and that was really like the state plan. And so with that, it was a requirement. They controlled the plan design. They also controlled the premiums. And when you look at the single rate, we were required to pay 80%, being the employer. So when I say these rates, you'll kind of understand. So for Key Care Expanded, the employer shares 75%, employee is 25%. For Key Care 200, it's 80% and 20%. Key Care 500 is 90 and 100. 90 and 10. And so that's kind of different. One of the things,
it's different based on the plan, but it's
correct.
But no matter what, if I choose the individual or I choose the family plan, you're still going to pick up that percentage.
Correct. So the contribution for all 3 plans, based on the work that you did for FY18, the employee contribution is the same.
Do we have a sense of what percentage of the folks who take the plan are individual versus a family plan?
Yes, we do. Based on that data, we were able to see that we had 43% that were on single. We had 14% that was on employee plus one. Employee family was 36%. So with that, it's almost split between single and your family.
So there may be a middle ground between the idea of asking spouses who could get coverage elsewhere to come off the plan. My employer, for example, will pay a certain percentage of the employee's cost, but only 50% of our spouse and children. So there's an incentive there to make sure that you're doing the most, as an employee, getting the best plan for yourself and your family, but it doesn't put the whole burden on the employer. So, thank you.
Just as a bit of a recap, I think that each member of the board that has spoken and asked questions, I think have hit many nails on many heads and heads on many nails, whatever. I really do think that we're at a point, and I appreciate the work of the compensation focus group. We're in a conversation now. I think that on the positive side, if you've, I don't know what to compare it to something that you have found there is no second to, and then whether it's a great, that's a wrong analogy, so forgive me in advance. I really like Chipotle. I shouldn't say that on a televised program, but I really do. And so I have a hard time finding, a substitute for that. And I know that many of our employees have commented to us and through so much feedback that the benefit has been it's been one of those things that has made working for our school division very rewarding, because so many needs have been met, that it's just a plan that is hard to find an equal. And I know when the board approved a middle plan a few years back, there was a hope that maybe that would be something that folks would choose, but that never did happen. And so I think we are at a point where, and I'll use some of the words that have been shared, a place that we need to be innovative, because the days of receiving the level of funding where we can sustain this level of a plan, particularly the rising premiums and our share, and then be able to accomplish many other things on the salary increase front and the resource front, we cannot do it. And so I appreciate that we're having one large conversation. It's complex, because at the same time, the board must consider that we, especially now, need to be able to retain and recruit teachers and staff members throughout our enterprise that we see that there's a state and national shortage of right now. And so we must do it intentionally, and I really go back to the phased approach that Ms. Gaines was alluding to, that as we come up on not only the budget that I'll recommend, but the board's work in looking several budget seasons out, how do you create a plan that can give our employees the opportunity to choose options that will be necessary quality, but hopefully at a more of a sustainable cost for the school division moving forward. I also believe that the education piece that several of you alluded to is one, because of our resources. We need a lot of time to be able to take this conversation to our employees and make sure that they realize the benefits of something that, for whatever reason, right now might be scary, as Mr. Braswell said, in terms of change, or might still have a negative connotation, even though the reality of it is that it could be quite advantageous to them. So I think this is going to be a central part of budget development, not only this year, but over the next several years. So I appreciate the board's questions and know that we will continue to bring the data. I think we have a commitment with our current partner, Anthem, to help us to, look ahead and problem solve. So thank you all for your interest in it, and I know it's complex, but I also think it's probably one of the most important aspects of the budget going forward.
Mrs. Gaines, I had one question. And what is our goal for the health insurance reserve? A recommended goal by Anthem.
Very good question, Ms. Graham, because you're always trying to balance your priorities. So when I had the conversation with them before, one of the things they had talked about was basically looking to have about 10 to 20%, because you just never know when you're going to have that bad year in terms of your claims. Yeah. So it's really something that you have to guard against, but again, you have to balance that with all your other priorities. So with that, right now, we pay about $40 million. And if you take 9 million divided by the 40, you're at about the 20% mark. But we do know, again, this year we ended well. So I think we're where we need to be. Yeah. So I think we're there. Correct. Right. Because we've had some good years that have allowed us to replenish. Yeah. And you never know that.
On a health question, because we have to keep in mind whatever we do is tied into recruitment and retention. Have you heard from our other neighboring neighboring divisions, school divisions, some of their game plan is, because they're facing the same dilemmas we are with their health insurance plans, and particularly to what we were just talking about with the participation rate or the amount that the employer is contributing toward the spouse or the family coverage. Is that something that others are looking at as well?
That one I would need to verify, Dr. Meyer. I know when we met with Anthem maybe about a year ago, they did share with us peer data of 4 other school divisions, and I don't recall seeing the surcharge fee. Yeah, most of correct. So the high deductible plan is a modernization move that many of them are making, as well as the HMOs. But the surcharge.
But they said the HMO was not really, wouldn't be feasible for us for another 2 years or.
2020, because the HSA and the high deductible plan, we could do that in 19. For 2020, they do need about a year and a half to do that network campaign. So being forward thinking, that's something that we're asking them to go ahead and start for us, because you're going to have to get to that point where you can save another $1 or $2 million. But that's something that everyone is doing now, the HMOs and the high deductible health plans.
Because in some ways, if it is feasible or possible to transfer, I don't know how you would say it, but if there is a savings whereby the employee is not necessarily paying it on health insurance, but is getting it in comp, the other form of compensation, instead of being benefits, it's on the salary side, because the year before, we were able to take, in essence, $1.5 million and redirect it. We're going to have to be doing a lot of that redirecting in order to accomplish our budget goals, as we move forward. So I'm just trying to think, at the same time, we can't penalize ourselves, we can't hurt ourselves on the recruitment side, but yet we have to continue. So as you're looking at, where you have in 3 years, modernize, going to have to put in some more specifics into that as to what kind of game plan can achieve the modernization whereby we can redirect.
And so one of the things we did at our November 20th meeting, Ms. Colbert and I, we basically gave them an engagement activity. And with this engagement activity, they're looking at comp and benefits, and they're starting off with a 4-year plan. So we'll have something to bring back to you. Okay. You're looking at 19 all the way through 2020.
Okay, you're ahead. Thank you.
And I wanted to caveat something that Dr. Meyer was saying. You can't make the assumption that the PPO plan is the superior plan. Health savings plans provide unique advantages in terms of not only being able to have control over the premium, but being able to premium reduce that through payroll on a pre-tax basis. So there's a lot of significant advantages. It's how it's packaged. It can be delivered as an advantage for recruiting and retention. So again, a lot of that has to do with education. It does, and making sure that people understand what the true benefits are. It's like I still have this Samsung 5 or something. Everybody laughs at me when they see it. They tell me all the time all the benefits that I'm missing out on this phone, and they're probably correct. And until I try it, do I realize that you know, what was I waiting on, you know? And so that's my point about the, you know, health insurance. We just have to make sure that we have innovative products where our employees at least initially have an opportunity to shop and use those. And then by word of mouth, they're going to tell their peers, hey, you know what, you're really missing out on a really good deal here, so.
Dr. Meyer and Mr. Braswell, to a couple of the points, I know that when we have to do two things. We have to compare ourselves and certainly find out what surrounding school divisions are doing. At the same time, we have to distinguish ourselves. And so it becomes a challenge because we are competing for the same resources that they are. And so in many cases, that would take us away from replicating a strategy unless we're sure that that strategy is enhancing their ability or capacity to retain and recruit employees, and particularly teachers. I also know with the education piece that we were talking about, we have to probably go to new levels of disaggregating our employee base and looking at, as we get especially more younger employees coming in to be a part of our school division, using that, as making that even a part of their entry into our school division. I agree with Mr. Braswell. I don't think it's so much that we're saying there's a superior plan for everyone, but we know that there are folks that have found that there's a plan that really meets their needs, but they have not had another set of viable options. So I think that's going to be something that, again, as long as it's an intentional plan over a period of years, I think it's possible for us to do that. But we also don't want to simply say, well, this is what everyone else is doing, when we don't know how it's going to work out yet. And that's why I think we've been hesitant to sort of make drastic recommendations as far as changes.
And the only comment I will follow up on that one is that, too, because we did make drastic changes in 18, the staff and working with the employee compensation focus group, we don't want to do too much drastically in 19 because you want to see the impact of what you did in 18. And if you have so much going in motions, you really can't evaluate your progress. So 2020 will be another opportunity 2 years down the road to do something else significant.
I believe that brings us to the FY19 budget dates.
In looking at the FY19 budget dates, in your folder, you will also see a one-pager of the proposed dates for your consideration. Also, I will display them on the monitor for the public to see. Based on information that we received thus far, the governor is scheduled to present his budget December 18th. We would like to have the school board pre-budget public hearing on January the 8th. In time past, this was done in November, but Dr. Baker and the staff thought it would be best to have it in January because you have more information coming from the governor's budget. Dr. Baker would present January 29th, and then after receiving a hard copy of his presentation, the board would come together and have a school board budget work session January 31st. And then you would have another work session February the 5th in order to get you ready to approve your budget on February the 12th, which would be both the operating budget and the CIP. Then the county administrator, based on their dates that have already been approved, he would present his budget February the 13th. Going to the next slide, the school board, you would present your budget to the Board of Supervisors February 15th. That would give the county about 5 days or so to digest the requests coming from the school board. They would approve their advertised tax rate on February the 20th. Then you would have a joint budget work session with them March the 13th, and then March the 29th. March the 29th, it would be the public hearing. There's a one-pager. Okay. March 29th, there would be a public hearing. In time past, this was at Cortland. It'll now be at Massaponax High School. April the 12th, the Board of Supervisors will adopt their budget and tax rates. Then the school board will come back together for your budget work session in preparation for you adopting your budget on May the 14th. So these are the dates that the staff is proposing. And it would require an action by the board this evening if you're up to that.
I just want to request a motion to approve the proposed budget dates.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the budget dates that are highlighted by our finance for the fiscal year 2019
I'll
budget
second that.
cycle.
Sorry.
Motion by Mr. Braswell to approve the proposed dates, second by Ms. Shelley. I have a discussion, and that is just to remind everybody that it's a new gubernatorial year with some changes in the state assembly. So although we are hoping that we'll have numbers by certain dates, this being an extended session is probably most likely, and this will be a long budget season, just to prepare us for that. Any more discussion?
I have something.
Ms. Shelley.
On the dates, we have about a month after, I got to see what those dates were. We have when the Board of Supervisors sets their tax rate, then a few days later, we have a work session, and then we don't adopt our budget for another month. Is that, so if we need to, we could come back together and, okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Ms. Palmer?
Just want to talk for a second about the short turnaround between the presentation and the tax rate date, because we discussed that some. Everybody's comfortable with, because I think the pressure falls on school staff and Ms. Gramp to be able to turn that around in a shorter amount of time than in the past, if I'm correct. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there and say, speak now or forever hold your peace on that if there's any issues with that.
I think the key factor here too is that FY19 is a reassessment year, and so this is one of the reasons why the timeline is the way that it is. The beauty of it, last year, they said it was one of the best presentations ever, Ms. Gramp. So if it's up to you, we can keep that same template and we can update it with the numbers. The beauty of it too is that for FY19, we're going to continue to use our current budget module, which is going to be advantageous. It would have been maybe a little bit more challenging if we were using our new budget system. So I think we have some things working in our favor, and we're going to just push hard and make sure we're ready for February 15th. Because I think it's important that they see it a few days before they approve the advertised tax rate. But again, this is up to the school board, and staff will support your decision whichever way.
We, of course, just had to respond to their preset dates. So, I mean, they weren't going to move that date, so we were.
That. And
yeah.
I just kind of wanted it to be, I wanted there to be an awareness that that is a challenge. And, if basically by you saying that you think you can handle it, then I respond by saying thank you, because that means that we can comply. And I appreciate the extra effort that that's probably going to take, both from you and from Ms. Graham.
Any further discussion?
One thing, and I don't know if this is something that we could do in the future, of course not this year. I think Ms. Gramp and I had mentioned it before. It would make us have to get our budget together way earlier, so that's why I don't think it would work. But what if we presented our budget to the Board of Supervisors before they actually had their presentation, so that the county administrator knows what we're proposing? Because we're proposing the day before he presents, so he's really probably not going to change anything. But if we were able to present a week before he presented, and there was, say, a gap of $6 million, then he might be able to readjust and say, we need to do this or we need to do that to be able to support the schools. Just throwing it out there, not this year, but maybe sometime in the future.
Ms. Shelley and the board, if you want to suggest a different type of process that you could engage in with the Board of Supervisors and then in my counterpart, I think that's certainly something to look at. I think the other thing that has been consistent, at least in the years that I've been here, is that the county administrator historically has included the superintendent's recommended budget in the budget that is presented by the county. Now, that is not to suggest that the school board could not turn the superintendent's recommended budget upside down and throw it away and start from scratch. That is certainly an option that you have, but I think right now that is probably going to be the best bet, because we found that even starting a week or two earlier cut short some time where we could gain greater clarity, because every budget season, since I've been superintendent, we have a lot of uncertainty at the state level. And so the closer we can be to what those numbers are going to look like, the better. As you know, they change anyway throughout the budget season, and you're making adjustments, and that won't change. But I will do my best with the staff's support as well as your input to recommend a budget that you will be able to strongly consider leaving primarily intact before you approve.
Madam Chair, do we have a motion on the floor to accept the?
We do. We're just still under discussion, and Mr. Blaine says he has further discussion on the dates.
Okay.
This is just on the dates.
This is on the motion that we've made to approve the dates.
That's fine.
So you're going to wait for guidance time? Okay. All those in favor of approving the dates?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. And now we are on to item 8, FY19 School Board Budget Discussion and Guidance. Mr. Blaine, would you like to start us off?
Very appropriate, actually. I think our challenge is going to be not dollars and cents, but when the county board votes, they vote on dollars and cents, and they do not vote, in my estimation, on the value that we're providing. And I think we have a big sales job that each of us needs to undertake to help all of the board members understand what really is going on in our schools. What does it mean when you have an extra aide in a kindergarten or first or second or third grade or something like that? What are the benefits of some of these employees that we're hiring? They need to understand the schools, and they do not. And they look at dollars and cents, and is this going to increase the tax rate, or is it going to decrease the tax rate? And that's their key. And we need to help them understand the value and to transfer to them that the children are our investment in our future, and if we don't spend them when they're spend money on them when they're children, it's too late later on in many ways. And I think that's where each of us can function as a salesperson.
Any more discussion and guidance? Mr. Braswell.
First of all, I want to thank Ms. Gaines and Mr. Uppercoat for their presentations. In fact, the entire staff is very informative, and I appreciate the presentation in terms of health insurance and the discussion that allows us to think out of the box so that we can position ourselves in out years for better opportunities, or have the ability to take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves. And I believe that they will. I believe that the health insurance piece will not only help us in terms of dollars and cents, I believe that it'll enhance us in terms of recruiting and retaining high-quality employees, because when you have innovative products and innovative benefits, that's going to translate into opportunities throughout the division, not just in dollars and cents. So I thank you for putting that out on the table and having a thoughtful discussion about health insurance. In terms of some of the other benefits, I'd actually like to see us restore fully the coaching stipend. They've went a very, very long time and sacrificed a very long time just to come back to par. And if there's a way to let's get them at par this year, I think it would be a great opportunity to reward a great group of employees that give a lot of their time for our youth and in a variety of different capacities, not just athletics, but in terms of mentorship and clubs and other activities where we pay stipends. And so I'd like to see us attain that. As much as I can't stand the activity fee, I understand incremental reductions in activity fees, and I'd like to see us drop that down to $25 next year. I mean, even though deep down in my heart I'd love to see it be zero, I understand that we have other priorities too that are equally important. Those priorities include raising substitute pay. We have to have competitive substitutes. It's a great opportunity for recruiting when we have in our own building people that we can evaluate on a day-to-day basis, and we attracted them there with a competitive substitute rate. So I think it serves more than just one purpose. I believe that we need to have an increase in substitute pay, and I think it helps the entire division and everything that we're trying to do. I'd like to see the activity bus, the way in which we're doing it now. I'd like to see it continue and then possibly strengthen in some ways. I don't know if expansion is really prudent at this time, but I think that we need to shore up where we're at right now with the activity bus. I've heard some positive things about the activity bus from some of the folks in the Spotsy High School community, and is bringing a bit of enthusiasm and excitement in not only their sports programs, but I'm waiting to hear what impact that's going to have in terms of remediation and other types of counseling for kids. And I think making sure that we do it right is more important to me than expansion on the activity bus. So I appreciate all the efforts that were brought forward, and I'm just sharing, just as one board member, some things that I'm going to look at during the budget season, not just because of what they represent in the definition of their name or their title or what they're doing, but how it integrates throughout the entire division and makes us, or puts us in a position of being, or using those things as a multiplier. So with that being said, I complete my comments.
Ms. Palmer?
I want to echo the thanks that have been bandied about. I've had the pleasure of sitting on the Budget and Finance Committee and learned a great deal in a short amount of time. And I have seen the spreadsheet that has been created to track incoming, to project student enrollment, and it is phenomenal. And the fact that we are really, I think, creating data that is reliable, and yeah, it's reliable. I have high confidence in it. My goal all along has been to be able to stand in front of the Board of Supervisors and say that this budget is clear and it is based on good data and good information. And I'm planning to do that from the other side of the podium. So I've appreciated the level of detail that you guys have been able to provide. I want to echo Mr. Blaine's comments that we do need to, once we get to the point where we all feel good about this as citizens or school board members, then we need to get out there and talk about the positive impact, the intangibles that Mr. Blaine spoke of, but also the tangibles and the facts. I've already seen misinformation floating around the community about what we spend money on and what the projections are going, and so the more information that you guys provide, the better, and I appreciate all that you have done so far. As far as priorities, one thing that I have heard in conversations that I haven't heard tonight is that our bus drivers and their compensation rates are, I think, lagging behind in everything's lagging, but I think that that's an area that when you come around again, I'd like to see more information on how we're retaining, not so much attracting, because I know that we have incentives and hiring bonuses for new bus drivers, but making sure that those who have stuck with us for so long are also being rewarded, I think would be a good thing. So that's just one area that has been buzzing around my ear for a while, so I want to share that with you. But thank you all for the amazing work you do.
Dr. Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think from what Mr. Braswell has mentioned on the activity fee, I think if we can do a phase-in approach like we have been doing, I think would be keeping us on track. As we take a look at our health insurance reserve as one of our options, I think is going to be good. The interesting thing, the analysis of the composite index going from 0.3617 to 0.3627, what that really says is that the locality has a greater ability to contribute a little bit more. And I'm really looking, even though it was only mentioned in here on the compensation, the Evergreen study about phasing, but when I think of the county, and I'm not sure how many employees, 500, 600, but if they put 2.1 million into their compensation plan in the first year with, say, 600 employees, and we have 3,000 plus, if you do that times 5 or 6, you're looking at 10 to 12 million. While it says phasing, but I think we really need to attack that compensation study, take advantage of the Evergreen study, since it wasn't at a point complete enough for us to emphasize it last year. We took a pass, but we should not take a pass this year. This coming year, we need to ask for the bulk of what we need and then phase in or tweak it on the 2 outlying years if you're doing a 3-year plan. And if that's what the county is doing, a 3-year plan, then let's do a 3-year plan. But let's attack the bulk of it right away and address that need. Because I'm thinking that as we take a look then at our comp, if we're going to have to phase more of it off for the employee to contribute more and the employer less, if that's going to be one of the tweaks, you have to have a way to do it. Those dollars need to be pre-tax, which I think they already are. Whatever the employee contributes is a pre-tax dollar. So that what Mr. Braswell was describing, that's in the plan. But we need to emphasize that that's part of the plan so that the employees realize that. I think the activity bus program, I would like to see it expanded, but I think we need to hear the follow-up report that we were promised that because it was initiated and we really hadn't been able to hear the academic progress or the positives to be gained by that. We heard that it was just beginning in terms of interest, and it takes a while for that interest to build, and I understand that. So we really need to hear a follow-up report come spring as to then, if it is successful, and I hope it is, that the game plan, we can expand that to other schools, and if it takes 3 years, that's fine, but if we can at least let people know that will be expanding and give continuity there, I think that would be a plus, so that we've got a trend that we're not trying to do everything at one time, but we are willing to phase it in as fast as we can. If the enrollment is increasing slightly and the FTEs are going to increase, especially for what Mrs. Richardson was saying on special ed, then I would anticipate that need having to be addressed, and that's going to mean more compensation. So while I understand some from the state may be saying in the first year of the biennium level funding, I've never heard of a biennium budget being level funded. I mean, that's a first, because they have to re-benchmark the SOQ, and I've never heard of SOQ being level funded. That's got to be a new interpretation. And it'll be interesting when we meet with the area legislators to see if that's truly their expectation and that it's going to be level funded. So I'm still anticipating that there would be additional funding from the state, and following the composite index, we would lose a little because the expectation is the county at the local level is supposed to be giving a little bit of that back, as well as with the VRS. So let's put the compensation high up on the priority list, and let's keep on the trend that we have started with our other projects. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Ms. Shelley?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I gave you guys a really long list back in May. So you have my list. All right. I don't remember if I put kindergarten aides and first grade aides on there, but that's an addition too. I've got a lot, but I know we have our cafeteria monitors, and you had mentioned maybe that the middle schools would like to have them as well. I think the high schools might like to have them as well. And if we could expand to 4 in the elementary schools, because I think we still have paras working in the elementary schools during lunches. If we had the paras in the cafeteria during that time, if we had 4 lunch monitors, then maybe our paras would be able to spend more time in the classroom. I'm not quite sure how it's working in every building, but I think that would be helpful, because the little ones, they need to have their ketchup open, they have to have their milk open. There's just so, peeling the orange, well, I don't think they have to peel oranges anymore, but there's just so much going on that I think the more hands in there, the more helpful for the students. Mr. Braswell mentioned subpay. Yes, definitely, if we could bring that up a little bit more as well. Activity buses, again, we've been talking about this for years. It's wonderful that we've been able to start it this year. As a start of an expansion, I had mentioned this last year, if we can't do it every day to help with some of the academic for the academics, the clubs, remediation, enrichment activities, even 2 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week. That way it would be more, we would know that it's more academic, not necessarily an athletic bus, but everybody could use it, and the athletes could use it those days as well. And then compensation. The teacher shortage is real. I'm reading about it in periodicals all the time. Pretty much once a week at least, I see something about teacher shortages. So that evergreen study needs to be on the forefront. We need to start looking at what our compensation is going to be for our employee groups. All of them, we know our largest employee group are teachers. So that's going to be a huge chunk. But that is something that we really, really, I think we need to be looking at to keep them competitive, because there is a shortage. We need to keep our teachers here, and we need to be able to get them. Our ELL students and our special education students, I know those numbers are just going crazy. We've seen 50 students just in 2 weeks for special ed, and our English language learner numbers are just, I know they're skyrocketing. So that's something else. And I mean, that's more staff. And that's just 2 areas. That's not everything else. So I'm thinking we're going to have to add some FTEs. And I would love to see our ratio of our ELL students go. I know we're already better than I'm hoping that we're better than the SOQs, but we need to be better than the SOQs, because they have no idea what it takes to teach students who don't speak English. So I think that's something else that we need to be looking at. And there's probably more, but that's all I have written down right now. So thank you. Thank you all for all of your work. I know you've been working, we're just in the pre-stages, and I know you're already working tirelessly. So thank you.
I just want to take a moment and thank you guys for this presentation, and it gives us tons to read about and learn about and eagerly await in the next couple months, because it's so much fun. And I want to make sure that the rest of the school board members are aware that tomorrow evening we have a joint work session with the Board of Supervisors at 6 p.m. and that we have a school board meeting on the 11th. And on the 12th, we have a board member orientation. And on the 13th, we have a legislative reception. So just want to make sure those dates are ahead of you and in your calendars. And we'll have some closing comments from Dr. Baker.
I just want to echo the appreciation to our staff for getting us off to a strong start this evening. And again, appreciate the board's feedback into the process, and it's certainly something that I and all of us will consider strongly as we begin to build the budget. Thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Dr. Meyer, second by Mr. Braswell. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.